Good morning, Kirk. We've got you on the call. If you want to go ahead and unmute your audio and your microphone, your camera.
There we go.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Kirk Leeds, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Iowa Soybean Association. And we're very proud to be hosting this AgTalks virtual town hall and to have such a great lineup of panelists. We're going to start with a short introductory video before I introduce our sponsors, today's moderator, and cover a few housekeeping items. So let's watch the video.
In the hog industry, in which what I do is about 13th nationally in exporting pork. We've seen a decline of markets based on the tariffs. It's been really difficult for us to be able to move product and then to be able to at least get a market that pays us for our product.
At the current prices, we cannot be profitable planting soybeans next year. And it's not just soybeans, it's all the trade. These tariffs are not just hitting farmers, they're hitting manufacturers. I sat on that round table, there was aluminum guys and steel guys and equipment guys, and it's just having a crushing, rippling effect.
When there's uncertainty about the markets for a product, it tends to back up into areas and the prices decline. The market risk that's present today is creating a lot of problems, a lot of price problems for farmers, and it's very difficult to plan for that.
The uncertainty in our market is a huge concern to us. It affects our business. We don't exactly know what we should plant. Are we going to have a market for it? Is there going to be demand for our product?
Well, I think that video has done a great job of kind of framing up today's discussion. AgTalks, is sponsored by some of America's leading agricultural organizations and businesses, including the Iowa Soybean Association, the National Corn Growers Association, National Milk Producers Federation, U.S. Dairy Export Council, Farmers for Free Trade, the Corn Refiners Association, Plant-Based Products Council, CACO-ISM, World Strategies, Fresh Produce Association of the Americas, American Farm Bureau Federation, and the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. AgTalks is a national conversation focusing on trade, supply chains, and the future of American agriculture. This conversation is critically important as we think about the disruptions we've seen in agricultural trade with tariffs, retaliatory tariffs, decreasing our exports, depressing commodity prices, and increasing the cost of some farm inputs. At the same time, we've seen glimmers of hope with the new US-Mexico-Canada agreement and other preliminary bilateral efforts. AgTalks is an effort to focus forward in a constructive, non-political fashion, regardless of who wins the 2020 election. What does the agricultural community want to see from the next White House and Congress? What policies can we adopt that will help boost exports and get U.S. agriculture back on a more solid footing? Today's virtual town hall is the first in a series of 5 town halls that AgTalks will convene this summer, including in Minnesota on August 5th, Michigan on August 13th, Pennsylvania on August 27th, and Wisconsin September 1st. You can sign up for any of these town halls and learn more about AgTalks at www.agtalks.net. With that, let me cover a few housekeeping items before introducing you to today's moderator, who will introduce the panelists. First, the program is on the record. The session will be recorded and will be available after today's session on agtalks.net website. We will open the session to audience questions and welcome your questions via the question button at the bottom of your screen. Angela Hoffman with Farmers for Free Trade is going to be our host and our moderator of the questions, and she will receive those, review those, and queue them up for the panelists. If you are media, please indicate such when sending your questions to ensure we get to your questions as quickly as possible. During the question and answer portion of the program, we will administer 2 polls through the Zoom platform. When you see those polling questions, please go ahead and respond to the polls. We will reveal the poll results at the end of the town meeting. Most importantly, to our panelists, we ask you to kindly mute your microphone if you are not speaking. So with that, let's get started. It's my great pleasure to introduce as today's panel moderator, a longtime friend and agricultural leader, Sarah Wyant. Sarah is editor and president of AgriPulse Communications, the media outlet that she founded. She is a veteran farm policy reporter, recognized nationally as a leader in agriculture. She is chair of the Farm Foundation's Board of Trustees, president of the National Association of Farm Broadcasters Foundation, and past president of American Agriculture Editors Association. In 2015, seems like just yesterday, Sarah, she was named as one of America's top women in media. Sarah was raised on a farm near Marengo, Iowa, that has been in their family for over a century. Sarah, thank you so much for willingness to be our moderator today and for kicking off this series of Ag Talks. Sarah, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kirk. It is a real pleasure to be with all of you today, and thank you to the Iowa Soybean Association for hosting today's virtual town hall. I also want to thank all of the participants, the farmers, the members of the media, the agribusiness leaders, and several dignitaries who are joining us today, including Secretary Tom Vilsack. We welcome all of you. We have a great lineup of panelists, and let me briefly introduce them for you. First, we have Jim Sutter, who is the CEO of the United States Soybean Export Council. Prior to joining USEC, Jim served 12 years as Vice President of Cargill's Grain and Oilseed Supply Chain Business Unit. He grew up on a crop and cattle farm in northeastern Colorado. Next, we have Kevin Ross, who's president of the National Corn Growers Association. He's a 6th-generation family farmer. Kevin and his wife, Sarah, grow corn, soybeans, alfalfa, and also have a cow-calf operation near Minden, Iowa. Here to speak about ethanol and renewable fuels and international trade, we're delighted to have Craig Willis. He's Senior Vice President of Global Markets for Growth Energy. Craig has served as president of ADM and served on many ethanol boards, including the board of the Iowa Renewable Fuels Association. Craig grew up on a farm near Monmouth, Illinois during the 1980s farm crisis. Next, we're pleased to have Mary Andrea join us with our panelists today. Mary is chair of the board of Vermeer Corporation, a global industrial and agricultural equipment company headquartered in a very popular spot in Iowa, Pella. Mary has served as CEO and COO of the Vermeer Corporation, which has facilities in Latin America, the Asia Pacific, China, India, Europe, and the United States. She serves as chair of the Iowa Business Council and is a past chair of the National Association of Manufacturers. Finally, we're joined by Brent Shanks, the director of the Center for Biorenewable Chemicals at Iowa State University. Go Cyclones. I'm really excited to have Brent on this panel. As we think about trade and supply chains, it's critical that we think about new product development, innovation, and the opportunities for value-added products. Brent is the Anson Marston Distinguished Professor in Engineering. He received his PhD in chemical engineering from the California Institute of Technology. So it's a great lineup. I'm really excited to hear all their comments, and we're going to ask each of them to start out with a short opening presentation. So Jim, let's start with you.
Thank you very much. It's certainly a pleasure to be together with this great group and participating in this event. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to give you a little update from a soy perspective, talking about the situation in the U.S. soy markets and then international markets. So the last few years, I don't really have to tell people, have been extremely challenging for U.S. farmers, but they have stayed resilient and committed to doing everything they can to provide soy for food, fiber, fuel, and other products for consumers around the world in a safe, sustainable manner. While our soybean farmers here in the U.S. have been doing their job, our organization's working on behalf of U.S. soy to provide stability by building demand and expanding global market access for U.S. soy products. Specifically, our job at USEC is to differentiate, build preference, and ensure market access for U.S. soy around the world, which I would say is now more important than ever. And incidentally, the normal export percentage of the U.S. soy crop is 60%. Let me talk with you briefly about where we've been over the last couple of years and then where we're going. So as you all know, the ending stocks of U.S. soy grew to a record high level at the end of the 2018-19 marketing year of around 1 billion bushels. This was a result of good production the previous year, reduced exports primarily to China, and the result of all that was the lowest price we've seen in 10 years. So not a good situation for farmers. In our organization, as we saw this coming, we launched an initiative called What It Takes. And very simply, it was what it takes to keep exports about unchanged versus where they were the previous year. And it was aimed at growing U.S. soy demand in other non-China markets. Diversification of markets has been a primary focus for the U.S. soy industry, United Soybean Board, FAS, the groups that we work with, even before the China trade uncertainty, but it became more important than ever. I want to call out 3 that have been real successes for us. There are others as well, but Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Egypt are markets where we see really good growth. Combined, they're over 5 million tons in terms of our export destinations this year, which is well above where they were last year at this time, which we thought was great then. So there is hope in these emerging markets. It takes time, and there's no silver bullet, but it's certainly something for the future years. Now, while all this was happening in the U.S. and with regard to U.S. exports, we've seen our export competitors growing aggressively. Brazil, we continue to read about their new land they're putting into production, the large crop they had the last year, the aggressive sales they've made. They've been helped by a weak currency, giving their farmers high prices in local currency, which is a different signal than we have. And also, we've seen aggressive investment by foreign purchasers of their soybeans, trying to improve their infrastructure, which is having an impact. So the spread is narrowing between Brazil and the U.S. in terms of export capability. So let me give you a little more insight now into what we see coming in the future and try to then leave you with a little bit of optimism. So the phase 1 trade deal with China, no discussion about soy would be complete without talking about that. We're very pleased to see this now being implemented and look forward to opening the door to return to strong relationship with China. Our organization and its predecessor, ASA, was doing work, their ASA International Marketing was doing work there, has been doing work collectively for 40 years. And we believe the relationship we built is still in good shape because we haven't missed a beat. We've continued to do our work there. And we're hopeful the U.S. will regain our market share in China while continuing our focus on diversification and growing in other markets. What also sets the U.S. soy apart from other origins is the sustainability of our production. And this is thanks to the great work that U.S. soy farmers do as they produce their crop on multi-generational farms, nurture the soil, and as they follow the guidelines that have been put out by USDA ever since back in 1935, when the Soil Conservation Service was formed. A few years ago, we helped create with a multi-stakeholder team, the U.S. Soy Sustainability Assurance Protocol, or SSAP, as a means of verifying the sustainability of U.S. soy. This is really growing in popularity. It's gained international acceptance from the European Feed Manufacturers Association, the Tokyo Olympic Commission, to just name a few. And it's really gaining popularity in terms of the shipments that we make. 40% of the U.S. soy exports year to date this year carry with it a verification certificate from the SSAP. So it is becoming important. And right now during this COVID-19 pandemic around the world, I see more and more international buyers and consumers concerned about where their food comes from. And I think sustainability is part of that concern. So that's important. The other thing we have really done lately is pivoted to virtual events. You know, our organization puts on lots of conferences around the world every year, around 200 of them. And normally we have experts from the US soy farmers, USEC staff traveling to these events to be speakers and to be participants with our buyers. Well, that's obviously not happening today. We have pivoted hard to virtual events. Between April and August, our team will put on 80 of these virtual events. Since we've started this process, we've already involved 25,000 participants and included influential US decision makers such as Secretary Perdue, Undersecretary McKinney, and many US soy farmers as speakers at these virtual events. So the attendee numbers have been strong, and also we've seen very good feedback from the surveys we do after each event, telling us that people appreciate the information we're giving them, and they're learning about US soy, and they're anxious to purchase US soy. So we're reaching more people than ever before using these virtual events. I've told numerous people that I think right now people are open to innovation and open to new ideas, so we're trying to take advantage of that. Now, for the optimism that I promised. Global soy demand every year, on average, over the last many years, and it continues to go into the future, grows at a growth rate of 4% per annum. So that's 11 million tons or 400 million bushels per year. So it means roughly we're going to need the equivalent of another US crop to supply the world in 10 years' time. I think that gives us all some optimism to be thinking about and something to be looking forward to as we're trying to make sure we're growing our production here in the US and doing our work internationally to make sure we capture a share of that. What we need to do is ensure that the US is operating on a level playing field with our competing exporters, and that the US continues to be a leader in openness and reliability as an exporter. We know our farmers produce a sustainable product, and we have a great export supply chain. We just need to be sure we have the right environment to be selling it. So thanks for the opportunity to give you a little overview of the US soy situation, and I really look forward to participating today. Thank you, and back to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks for that optimistic note in the middle of a lot of challenges that you've been dealing with. So let's turn it over to Kevin Ross now to share some comments. Kevin?
Hey, thanks, Sarah, and good morning to everybody on the webinar and call here. Yeah, as Sarah mentioned, I'm a farmer from Southwest Iowa, and where we're at, it's awful dry right now. So if you guys that are out there across the U.S. And beyond, if anybody can send me some rain, I'd really appreciate it for our crop down here. That said, I want to talk to you a little bit about corn and the industry and our views of national corn as to what we see for the future of trade and what we've been working on in the last several months and looked in the future as well. So, first of all, last year around this time, we saw a lot of issues surrounding trade. We were waiting on a lot of trade agreements to get done and signed. And towards the end of last year, saw some positive movement, with those trade agreements getting done. But again, at this time, still we were looking at a big crop last year, and lowered ethanol demand due to small refinery exemptions. We're still putting pressure on the ethanol market for us as well. So things that were, putting some pressure on the corn market at the end of 2019. And as we moved into 2020, we looked at those issues, and we thought maybe we wouldn't have any. We had a lot of optimism going into 2020. The trade agreements were getting done, and you'd think that things couldn't get worse. But let's say never say never, because all of a sudden we've dealt with COVID and all the issues surrounding coronavirus, and so what that caused. We knew we were going into this year with large projected acres as well for corn again in 2020, but also slowed ethanol consumption due to coronavirus impacts and the less driving that has been happening all across the U.S. So those things, along with the meat industry disruptions, have certainly made 2020 outlook change significantly over the last several months. And we've commissioned a study at the University of Illinois that showed the first analysis was $59 per acre average from a decline in income from March through early June. And then for the 2020 crop, we're showing an average of $3.20 per bushel, and that resulting in an $89 per acre revenue decline when compared to the pre-20 or pre-COVID estimates there. So if we have those losses actually realized or that level or even more, those would represent the lowest corn income levels since 2006 for corn farmers. So significant challenges that that we're facing right there in those numbers. So how did we respond? What did NCGA do? What were we looking at doing? Well, we didn't tuck our head between our legs and run away. And we responded, I think, in a way that is persistent and concentrating on managing what we thought we could have an impact on, and actually what we could actually manage and go from there. And so we set up a task force that was regionally diverse. We had folks giving input from farmers and our CEOs across our state network, as well as state presidents that were all across there to gain insight as to what was happening and the impacts that were happening into local markets across the U.S., as well as understand how we could better respond to that crisis that's going on. Secondarily, we really sharpened our focus, I think, on recovery and what we can do. Again, having the foresight to see what things we can actually impact moving forward. So what that means, from a recovery plan standpoint, is what we're looking at from the short term is involving our stakeholders into an information gathering area, and really concentrating on the small things that we think will help move the needle and really chew through what's the potential 3 billion bushel carryout. As we see, a lot of places have a better moisture situation than I've got, and there's a lot of corn out there, I think, going to be in this year's crop. So what do we have to do with that? Well, we've got to work to, again, sharpen the focus and make sure we can chew through this big carryout. So a couple of things for that. I think one of the silver linings of the whole thing has been that exports have been really solid for us throughout this COVID issue, and really that's been one of the things that from the system standpoint, there hasn't really been any major breakdowns from that, and for those corn bushels getting moved overseas and out of the U.S. So that's been very a positive spot for us for sure. These types of things that we can focus on and really improve on, help us dive into the long-term things that we want to look at as well for our strategy that we've had in place for a while. And so a couple of things that I want to talk about with that, our long-term goals, would as well be ethanol. We've been working very diligently on a high-octane, low-carbon standard that we think would be the next step in, increased ethanol sales across the U.S. We really believe that those gallons, would be the next incremental move forward and really help from an air quality standpoint as well, but could be the next, large demand driver for corn. So that's one of the major things that we talk about with ethanol as well. Obviously, just holding the EPA accountable and the integrity of the RFS. Those are things that we need, and we're also, supporting ethanol exports, and certainly our partners in the U.S. Grains Council have been doing a fantastic job of concentrating on ethanol exports and DDGs, and really building out a program over the last several years. I'm sure Craig will talk a little bit about that, but building out that program and moving that forward has been really fantastic. So when it comes to trade, one of the other things that you talk about, and moving the details, moving the concentrating on the things that we have positive moving, and how can we, augment those things moving them forward. We have some good things. Again, China, the China Phase 1 deal and the Japan Phase 1 deal, both very big things from our perspective, as well as USMCA. And as I look at that deal, USMCA especially, the first one was in place for a very long time. And I think that's one of the biggest things about re-signing that deal is you get a kind of a reset, and we're hoping to see this one, in place in a similar fashion for another 20 years with our two largest trading partners. So very encouraging to have that kind of reset moment and move forward. On the downside of that, though, over time, because of the market disruptions that we've had within trade, and we have lost ground to some of our competitors. You've seen Brazil breaking out ground, and Argentina certainly always staying in the marketplace when it comes to corn. These are, I think, going to be continued larger and larger competitors that we're going to have to deal with. You hear, again, more and more about Brazil and their corn acres every day. We would like to see Southeast Asia, that definitely becoming a more of a concentrated position for U.S. and the trade agreements. I think the income levels there are rising and the energy needs are rising very fast in those countries. So we think that focusing in that area and that region would be very key for U.S. corn exports. And then lastly, when it comes to trade, we're tackling the non-tariff trade barriers that, plague corn and corn products, biotech issues, maximum residue levels, those types of things. And certainly, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the remaining 232 tariffs that are still, causing us issues in the ethanol market in China. So lastly, on other things that we think we can do to strengthen the competitiveness of the U.S. corn industry, is leveraging our sustainability. We know that we have a lot of folks that are working on sustainability produced crops, and we improve on that every year. And I think that's really key when you talk about sustainability. It's just the continued improvement that we work towards, as well as for us, improving infrastructure across the entire system. This is something that you saw a new WRDA bill get passed out of the House, I believe, yesterday or the day before, and that is something that we encourage and certainly want to see improvements to our lock and dam system. Has been a priority of ours for many, many years. So investments in infrastructure are keys for us. And then the new uses, I think Dr. Shanks will talk more about that, but the development of new uses for corn and corn products are things that we really believe will drive demand, not just here at home, but certainly overseas and trade overall. And that's things that are just vitally important to our corn crop. So the U.S. corn should be a first choice for suppliers. We know from quality and perspective of sustainability and things like that, we want to be in that position, and we think our growers are ready to continue to be there too. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, or back to you, Sarah, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Kevin. That was a great overview of all the different challenges that you're facing in terms of expanding exports and sales. Obviously, it was nice to have the announcement from USDA this morning of some additional purchases by the Chinese to bring in more corn, but you've got a lot more to move, as we all know. So next, we're going to hear from Craig. Craig?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you to the sponsors of the program. Thank you, Sarah. My job is to live and breathe trade, so this event is very timely right now. It's pretty hot in the kitchen out there on the trade side, as all of us know. I work for Growth Energy. We're a large biofuel trade association. We're based in DC, and we focus a lot on policy, but we also focus on market development. We try to get more ethanol out there for Kevin, try to take care of that $3 billion or bushel carryover he's talking about. And we also working hard on the global side, and that's my primary role. So there's a lot of opportunities there. We represent our members are some of the largest exporters of ethanol and or of distillers grains, which is an animal feed byproduct from the corn ethanol process. And so those exporters are extremely concerned, and they want us to grow these markets. And the opportunity out there on ethanol is huge. The U.S. and Brazil have, for several decades now, had successful ethanol programs. We've got a 10% blend rate here in the States. Brazil is blending around a 47-48% blend rate, roughly. So we're doing all right. It's the rest of the world where the low-hanging fruit is. The rest of the world collectively is blending around a 1% blend rate if you average them all together. So if we could just simply take the rest of the world from a 1% blend rate to a 10% blend rate, that's 20 billion gallons of potential ethanol. And that's why we do a lot of work on that. That's why Kevin and National Corn Growers support it. And we're very close partners, both of us, with U.S. Grains Council on trying to roll this out. As far as opportunities go, I think we'll probably talk about China a lot today. China is a big one. It's the second largest gasoline market in the world. For ethanol, it could be a needle mover. Back in 2017, they announced a policy to have E10 or 10% ethanol nationwide by 2020. What's 2020? It's come. It hasn't gone yet. I think we'd all like maybe to see it gone, but they are not blending up to 10% yet. But it was an aggressive goal. But they are continuing to move forward in different provinces and different large metro areas, and the potential there is big. If they go to E10 nationwide, that would be 3.5 billion gallons of new ethanol demand. And just for the audience that doesn't watch all these numbers day to day, that'd be double the size of our best ethanol export year ever, which was just 2 years ago. So a challenge with China, there's not just opportunities, there's of course challenges. Back to springs ago, as we went into this trade skirmish, I guess I'll call it, they, in the spring and the summer of 18, put on a 70% duty, or basically a tax on ethanol going into that country. And ethanol has a lot of great economic characteristics, good blending economics, but we can't overcome a 70% tariff. So we've been shut out of that country now for 28 months, since March of 2018. The good news, here as we come into January of this year, we had the phase 1 agreement signed. Ethanol was in that agreement. Distillers Grains was in that agreement. But China's made a decent first move. They went from the 70% tariff to 45%, but still a 45% tariff is too high. And it's just, frankly, we aren't shipping any product there because the arbitrage is not open. So we continue to work with USTR, USDA, the administration, to try to get that down to a manageable level. And the potential there is huge. China has to meet $36.5 billion in ag purchases this year. Ethanol could add $1 billion a year easily, over $1 billion. Distillers Grains could also add $1 billion to that number. So that's the story we continue to tell, and we want to stop that drought of ethanol exports going over there. One other country here before I close up, Brazil. I talked earlier, a lot of opportunity there. They've done a great job on ethanol. They have roughly 47% blend across their country. And they're the third largest gasoline market in the world. They're the second largest ethanol producer and consumer. And they're our largest ethanol export destination. But not only do we export there, a lot of your audience may not know, they ship a lot of ethanol to us. And that's where the rub is, and maybe more relative to this trade conversation. So back in 2017, they put a 20% duty on much of our ethanol that flows into that country. And unfortunately on our side, when they export to the US and we import, the United States, we don't have parity there. We're bound because of the WTO rules to a 1.9% tariff on any product coming here. So we go there, they charge us 20%. Their product comes here, it's only 1.9. And my mom, I've heard it many times through the years, life's not fair. And that is not fair. And so we're continuing to talk to the administration about how do we get parity there. We simply want free trade at the end of the day. So with that, closing up here, there's probably a lot of Iowans on this phone call. Iowa, I believe, is the top ag exporting state in the country. Just as you talk to your elected officials, which the people in your state are great at, I just ask them to bring up issues, like these on ethanol. And ethanol is not the only commodity going through that, but that would be my ask here. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Craig. And just a quick follow-up, as you mentioned phase 1 and the potential for ethanol and DDGs, how optimistic are you that we might still get some sales to China before the end of this calendar year?
Well, we have seen corn prices in China rise quite a bit, and I think Kevin's members have exported a lot of product here. There's a lot on the books that I think someone said at the outset here. So I'm hopeful as the year goes along, if they take that tariff down, 45% is not going to work, and that was part of the 232. But if they take that out, I think that arbitrage has opened up a little more because prices have risen there. So I'll give it a small chance. I'm hopeful, but we need some work out of the Chinese government to lower that duty. 45% tax, or duty just doesn't work.
All right, thank you very much. Now we're going to turn it over to Mary to discuss a little bit about the perspective from a manufacturing company. So Mary, on to you.
Thank you so much, and I'm honored to be part of a panel. Vermeer is a 72-year-old company. We are still privately held. I'm a second generation. We have third generation of leaders in the business. And we do serve agriculture, and particularly in the forage markets. My dad in 1971 invented the first large round hay baler in the United States that was commercialized. And I actually also grew up on a farm and walked beans and helped put up square bales. So I was also happy to see the large round hay baler. And we also serve the construction markets. So because we can do these Zoom calls, we've put a lot of fiber in the ground. So construction, environmental, rental, and landscape markets is also part of our business. And I'm also proud to be an Iowan. Iowa is critical to the food supply around the world. There is no doubt about that. So I'm just going to talk for a couple minutes on trade, on the supply chain, and also the importance of rural broadband. In trade, exports are really crucial. You've heard that from all of my colleagues on the panel, really crucial for Iowa. In 2019, the manufacturers and ag exports out of Iowa totaled over $16 billion. And they went to 199 countries, which I think is, often we think about the big countries, but 199 countries is pretty substantial. And in just May of this year, Iowa was again recognized as the #1 exporter of large tractors and combines, #2 in balers, hay equipment, and seed planting equipment, and 3 in dairy equipment. And USMCA was a huge deal for Iowa. Canada and Mexico is where 50% of Iowa exports go to. And over the last decade, exports to Canada and Mexico of ag, construction, and mining equipment has gone up 50%. So very important. Plus, small and medium-sized manufacturers in Iowa are 81% of those exports. So, you know, it's important for all size companies. And the Farm Bureau does state that they hope we realize $2 billion for the nation in additional farm exports due to USMCA. And I know at our company right now, 1 out of every 5 of our team members really has a job due to exports. But there are lots of challenges. You've heard them everywhere from the strong dollar, the high steel prices, trade frictions, certainly tariffs, low commodity prices, the shifting in the supply chain, and definitely China. You know, I think we're all pleased that we have a phase 1, but we want to see that really roll out for the whole year as far as some of the policy initiatives, but also obviously for more trade and more exports for the state of Iowa. On supply chain, for us, we would prefer to have all of our components in the United States, just because from a transportation, supply, delivery situation, that's best. However, in reality, 75% of our componentry, our supply chain is within the United States. So we have country of origin outside the United States. Europe actually is a big one for us. And so when we were hit with the trade and the tariff barriers, definitely has an immediate impact to cost, to gross margin, to the bottom line, but also to availability. And then COVID made that worse in many conditions. And so, you know, we definitely saw a huge increase in steel prices at the end of 2017, 2018. And, you know, that unfortunately has to flow through down to our customers as well. I'd just like to say also a word about broadband, precision ag, need for information, for markets, for sourcing, working from home, telehealth. There's so many reasons why we need to have good internet connections in rural areas. According to something I saw on the USDA website, 80% of the 24 million American households who do not have reliable and affordable high-speed internet are, guess what? They're in the rural areas. In Iowa, some of the money from the federal CARES initiative is going to be redeployed for broadband, for new construction, and for areas that are less wired. So hopefully that will be a very positive thing for the state of Iowa. But as far as overall recommendations from my standpoint, I also really am asking for more opportunity for free trade. it's really interesting. I've been watching free trade agreements for a long time, and the countries that we have free trade agreements with are about 10% of the GDP of the world, but they're 43% of the exports from our country to free trade countries. And I know in our company, when I've done some of this analysis, about 2/3 actually of our exports go to countries that we have free trade agreements with. So free trade agreements are very important, whether it be with the UK and the EU, or I'd really love to see the Trans-Pacific Partnership, with discussions starting there again. And then another thing, which was also mentioned, investment in infrastructure is so important. Right now, we're spending about 1/3 of what we were on infrastructure in 1960. And I realize that was the big interstate play. But according to the Association of Civil Engineers, we rate about a D+ as far as our infrastructure, and it's just getting worse. And we know that we all use roads and bridges and ports and waterways and rail and airports, digital, water, wastewater, energy. And I don't think we can afford to keep falling behind in how we are competitively ranked in infrastructure. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Sarah, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mary. You really raised a lot of the challenges that we all face. And I remember a couple of years ago when I spoke at Iowa State and how many of the students go home on weekends to help on their family farms and don't have broadband. And it's really a huge challenge that's been heightened in our awareness because of all the COVID restrictions as well. So thanks for underscoring